Welcome to Learning English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Pete Musto.
And I'm Dorothy Gundy. This program is aimed at English learners, so we speak a little slower and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
Today on the program, you will hear the English expression teaching program, Words and Their Stories, with Anna Mateo. Later, Steve Ember brings us one part in an ongoing series about America's history called Making of a Nation. But first, the Higher Education Report.
Mental health is no small issue at colleges or universities around the world, including the United States. The youngest students at U.S. colleges are just out of high school. Most first-year college students are just 17 or 18 years old. Others are usually between the ages of 19 and 24. For many, this is the first time living away from home. In some cases, they are far from friends and family members. College students quickly learn that they have a lot of responsibilities, some of which they alone must face. They will have hours of intense study, as well as more critical needs, like eating and sleeping well. Some students need to find a job and work to help pay for their education. On top of this, students are meeting new people, making new friends, and establishing their identities as independent adults. With all of these demands coming together at the same time, it is no surprise that many students struggle with mental health issues. Feelings of worry, nervousness, emotional stress, and depression are just some of the issues they may face. Most U.S. colleges and universities provide mental health services and have trained specialists to help their students. But Nathan Demers notes that such resources are not always enough of a solution. Demers is a trained clinical psychologist. He is also vice president and director of clinical programs for a website called You at College. The site is a joint project of Grit Digital Health, a Colorado-based business, and Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. It aims to create solutions for mental health issues in ways that go beyond traditional methods.
In 2013, several Colorado State students ended their own lives. The university's administration admitted it was facing serious problems with student mental health and needed a solution, Demers says. It was then that administrators reached out to a former CSU student who was the head of a company called Cactus Communications. A few years earlier, the company and Grit Digital Health set up an internet-based tool to help adult men learn about mental health and seek support services. The website used humor to make treatment of mental health issues feel less like a duty and more like an enjoyable activity. Demers notes the Colorado State administrators wanted something like that. Yet they also understood that college students have their own special needs. College students are often very busy and have little free time to spend doing something that feels like work, Demers says. They also usually do not see mental health issues for what they are. They're stressed out of their minds, he told VOA. They're not keeping up in the classroom, so they're coping with drugs and alcohol. They're not sleeping well, missing class because of it. But they say, I don't have a behavioral health disorder. Someone else should be going to the counseling center. That's not me. So when the university and Grit Digital Health began working on You at College, they tried to make it as appealing to college-aged people as possible, Demers says. Instead of making an online tool dealing mainly with mental health, they organized the website around 3 ideas: succeed, thrive, and matter. Succeed relates to issues of success, both in education and one's career. Thrive relates more to issues of physical and mental health. And matter relates to finding a purpose and connecting to others at one's college or university. When a student first uses You at College, they are given a short test that examines the student's personal qualities in all 3 areas. Based on the results, the website suggests news stories and videos to students. It also has links to other materials that offer advice on how to deal with issues they may struggle with. Demers notes that all of the site's material is based on the latest mental health studies, takes into consideration current events, and is presented in a clear and enjoyable way. However, most important of all, he argues, it makes suggestions for school-based resources students might use to deal with their problems.
Sam Jennings says information like this is extremely important, especially for first-time students. Jennings is the Dean of Students for South Dakota State University in Brookings, South Dakota. After You at College was launched at Colorado State in 2016, about 20 other schools expressed interest in the website. They have since agreed to work with Grit Digital Health on developing it for their students. South Dakota State started working with the company earlier this year. Jennings says that colleges and universities try their best to inform students about all the different support services they have to offer. But it might not always be clear to students exactly what kind of support they need for a given problem. And first-year students are often given more information about their new school, community, and surroundings upon arrival than they know what to do with. There's no way they're going to keep all that front of mind when the need comes up 6 weeks down the road when they are in crisis, says Jennings. He adds that he has researched similar online tools before, but none of them offer such direct advice for which resources students might find helpful as You at College. This includes meeting times for special student support groups and the location of counseling centers and names of the people who work there. All of this makes it that much easier for students to seek help sooner, before their problems build to a point beyond their control. To date, You at College has had over 58,000 users at Colorado State alone.
Pushing students towards taking action earlier is especially important considering how much more demand there is for support services, says Lyn Lindy. She heads the Center for Counseling Practice, Policy, and Research at the American Counseling Association. Lindy notes many young people are highly informed about the problems facing the world today, and as a result, Some feel less safe and more worried than earlier generations. So more of them seek out mental health support services, and many colleges and universities struggle to meet the increased demand. Seeking help sooner helps ease the pressure on college counselors when issues begin to increase in severity, she says. And having tools available online is especially helpful for the current generation of college students, as they grew up using personal devices for almost everything. However, Lindy warns that overdependence on technology can lead to other problems. And the rules and laws governing traditional counseling services do not yet exist for more modern mental health resources. Also, websites and other online tools will never do as much good as meeting with a counselor in person. They are never going to replace the relationship that develops between the counselor and the student or the group, said Lindy. They go on this journey together. I'm Pete Musto.
And I'm Dorothy Gundy.
Now, the VOA Learning English program, Words and Their Stories. On this show, we explore the world of American English. We talk about common expressions, where they come from, and, most importantly, how to use them. Today, we talk about behavior and self-control. There are ways of behaving that almost everyone considers normal or comes to expect. Children learn very early that some behaviors are more accepted than others. They learn how to control themselves and how to behave in certain situations. This learning continues into adulthood. Well, for most people it does. Not everyone behaves how they are expected to. So today we talk about loose cannons. A good word to describe a loose cannon is unpredictable. You never know how an unpredictable person will act in any given situation. But not all unpredictable people are loose cannons. Some people often change their minds about things, or they surprise you by doing something they do not usually do, or that is out of character. We could describe such people as changeable, uncertain, or, here's a good word, fickle. But I would not describe a loose cannon as fickle. Fickle people can be annoying, but they are not usually dangerous. Loose cannons, on the other hand, are often unpredictable in violent ways, so they can be very dangerous. A good word to describe a loose cannon is volatile, or likely to explode. So where did the expression loose cannon come from? By definition, a cannon is a large gun that shoots heavy metal or stone balls. Because of their weight, cannons have to be firmly tied down. Hundreds of years ago, cannons were often found on battleships. Sometimes a battle at sea with another warship or a storm would free them from their mounting. As you can imagine, a loose cannon rolling around could do serious damage to a ship and her crew. We can say the same about a person who is a loose cannon. Loose cannons, both the guns and people, are difficult to control. Their unpredictable behavior can cause problems for them and others. Family, friends, co-workers, or larger groups, such as a sports team or political party, can all be affected by a loose cannon. You are not sure how loose cannons will react to something. They could get angry, losing their temper at the smallest thing. Now, let's hear how these words and expressions can be used.
Okay, so local officials are meeting tomorrow night to decide whether or not our neighborhood gets a new school. We need to bring some people who can speak about this issue.
Let's ask DJ from across the street. He works at a school.
No way! He's a loose cannon. One minute he seems fine, but the next he is shouting and hitting the table.
What about Helen?
Helen? She's more unpredictable and volatile than DJ. One wrong word, and she could explode. They are both loose cannons.
Well, can you think of any other people? How about Matthew?
No. The city council banned him from attending any meetings for 1 year.
Are you serious?
Yes. At the last meeting, he completely lost his temper and actually hit someone.
Wow, I'm feeling our neighbors are a collection of loose cannons.
Maybe let's not tell them about the meeting. They will do more harm than good.
She is dangerous.
And that's Words and Their Stories for this week. I'm Anna Mateo.
You know she's coming. She is a loose cannon. All you can do is run. Loose cannon. If she points to you,
From VOA Learning English, this is The Making of a Nation, American History in Special English. I'm Steve Ember. This week in our series, we complete the story of the American Revolution. The time is December 1776. British General William Howe has decided to stop fighting during the cold winter months. The general is in New York. He has already established control of a few areas near the city, including Trenton and Princeton in New Jersey. General George Washington and the Continental Army are on the other side of the Delaware River. The Americans are cold and hungry. They have few weapons. Washington knows that if Howe attacks, the British will be able to go all the way to Philadelphia.
He's looking at his army, which is melting away.
Historian Gordon Wood says that moment was the low point of the war for George Washington.
And he decides to make one great effort on Christmas night and crosses the Delaware at dead of winter, cold ice, and he crosses and attacks Trenton, where you have about 1,000 Hessians who are kind of overwhelmed and defeated. It's a small tactical victory, but a great psychological effect, because it's the first time that Washington had actually done something positive, and it really does, I think, change the psychology of the war.
Another result of the victory at Trenton was that more men decided to join the army. It now had 10,000 soldiers. This new Continental Army, however, lost battles during the summer to General Howe's forces near the Chesapeake Bay. And in August 1777, General Howe captured Philadelphia. Following these losses, Washington led the army to the nearby area of Pennsylvania called Valley Forge.
Valley Forge was the camp where George Washington and his army spent a really miserable winter.
Alice Camps is a curator at the National Archives in Washington, where some of the country's most important documents are kept. One of those documents is a letter that George Washington wrote from Valley Forge.
And the men had nothing to wear, they had no blankets, they had very little to eat. Illnesses were rampant. It was a very, very miserable experience for them.
But in the middle of that winter, Washington finds out that France has decided to sign a treaty with the colonists.
This is fantastic news. This is the kind of news that would make anyone just run about screaming with joy and doing handstands. But Washington is so reserved, and he says that he's received this news with, quote, the most sensible pleasure, unquote.
He also says he is going to wait for the government to approve the treaty before he tells the army.
The fact that he is not going to announce this news immediately to his army speaks to the fact that he was always concerned with doing the right thing and with protocol.
By the spring of 1778, General Washington and his army were ready to fight again. General Howe was still in Philadelphia. His behavior as a military leader was sometimes difficult to understand. At times, he was a good commander and a brave soldier. At other times, he stayed in the safety of cities instead of leading his men in battle. The next series of important battles in the American Revolution was led by another British general, John Burgoyne. His plan was to capture the Hudson River Valley in New York State and separate New England from the other colonies. Doing this, the British believed, would make it easier to capture the other colonies. The plan did not succeed. American General Benedict Arnold defeated the British troops in New York. General Burgoyne had expected help from General Howe, but that help never came. Burgoyne was forced to surrender at the town of Saratoga. The American victory at Saratoga was extremely important. It ended the British plan to separate New England from the other colonies. It also showed European nations that the Americans might be able to win their revolution. This was something that France especially had wanted ever since being defeated earlier by the British in the French and Indian War. The French government had been supplying the Americans secretly through the work of America's minister to France, Benjamin Franklin. Franklin was popular with the French people and with French government officials. He helped gain French sympathy for the American cause. After the American victory at Saratoga, the French decided to enter the war on the American side. The two nations signed military and political treaties. Historian Gordon Wood says this alliance created bigger problems for the British.
Because once the French were involved, it turns the thing from counterinsurgency for the British. They're now fighting a world war.
The British immediately sent a message to America's Continental Congress. They offered to go back to a time of better relations. the Americans rejected the British offer. The war would be fought to the end. In 1779, Spain entered the war against the British, and the next year, the British were also fighting the Dutch to stop their trade with America. The French now sent gunpowder, soldiers, officers, and ships to the Americans. However, neither the Americans nor the British made much progress in the war for the next 2 years. By 1780, the British had moved their military forces to the American South. They quickly gained control of South Carolina and Georgia, but the Americans prevented them from taking control of North Carolina. After that, the British commander moved his troops to Yorktown, Virginia. The commander's name was Lord Charles Cornwallis. Both he and George Washington had about 8,000 troops when they met near Yorktown. Cornwallis was expecting more troops to arrive on British ships. What he did not know was that French ships were on their way to Yorktown too. Their commander was Admiral Francois Comte de Grasse. De Grasse met some of the British ships that Cornwallis was expecting and defeated them. The French ships then moved into the Chesapeake Bay near Yorktown. The Americans and the French began attacking the British with cannons. Then they fought the British soldiers hand to hand. Cornwallis knew he had no chance to win without more troops. He surrendered to George Washington on October 17, 1781. The war was over. American and French forces had captured or killed half of the British troops in America. The surviving troops left Yorktown playing a popular British song called "The World Turned Upside Down." How were the Americans able to defeat the most powerful nation in the world? Historians give several reasons. The Americans were fighting at home, while the British had to bring troops and supplies from across the ocean. British officers made mistakes, especially General William Howe. His slowness to take action at the start of the war made it possible for the Americans to survive 2 difficult winters. Historian Gordon Wood at Brown University in Rhode Island says the British also thought more colonists would support them.
When Burgoyne comes down the Hudson Valley, he starts out with an army of 10,000 or so, and he has to hack his way through the woods, and he keeps losing troops to small militia. He counted on more loyalist support than there was, and I think the British miscalculated terribly on that point.
Another reason the Americans won was the help they received from the French. Also, the British public had stopped supporting the long and costly war. Finally, America might not have won without the leadership of George Washington. He never gave up hope.
And that's our program for today. Listen again tomorrow to learn English through stories from around the world. I'm Pete Musto.
And I'm Dorothy Gundy.